Yes! Welcome to Chatting Up the Chick. Yes, it's me, your host, Chris the Chick, all the way from Cluckerton Palace. Yes. Right,
Yeah,
we are in episode 3 of our series of deconstruction or unraveling religion. And last week we spoke about the Bible. And I just want to make a quick disclaimer right here, right now, Phils. I feel like I said some things last week that
you regret?
no, not that I regret, that will rub people up the wrong way. And I want to say now is I have nothing against the Bible. If anything, I think it's a very powerful book and it's well worth reading, and it has the ability to change people's perspectives and actually make a better world. But
Sure.
I'll also put a caveat on that and say it's also proven to be one of the most destructive and misunderstood books of all time as well.
Yeah. I was actually listening to a video this morning on cults. There's a channel I follow on YouTube. It's called 42, and it was talking about this cargo cults. But before it started talking about it, it gave an examples of Gloryvale, and then talked about a little bit of detail how Gloryvale started about this guy, blah blah blah. But it made a good point about how, from the Bible you can get two types of people basically. Well, not two types, but you can get all sorts of types. But you can get very extremes of each side of people that follow the Bible or read the Bible and try to live by its standard, is like people who go turn into cults and go down that path, and then you have like people like Jesus and Gandhi, and it's not only just the Bible. I think it's all religion. When how man interprets it will be determined how how he lives. It's not per se the Bible's fault or any book's fault essentially, or any religion's fault. It's just how man operates in his mind that determines the outcomes of what he thinks is right and what he thinks is wrong.
And a great example for that is I've seen people who have converted to Christianity and their whole premise, their whole character and personality has just been magnified. And when I say magnified, I mean they had a type of destructive personality in the first place. And because they've joined a religion of Christianity in a certain mold, it's only amplified that destructive behavior.
Yeah.
So, like, I know people who before becoming a Christian were already angry. They already had issues with people. They already found society to be problematic in the first place. But now that they're a Christian and after reading the Bible, they've now reinforced their hate for people. It's now they have so-called divine inspiration towards their hate, and it magnitudes it by
and I guess that's a good point, is that then the true intent of your heart you don't often realize, because you read a potential religious book and you think just because you've read it and you've maybe understood it in terms of how you thought it's meant to be understood, you're immediately better person, but that's not really the case.
No, but anyway, this week we are going to go on to the conversation of talking about God and what we see the divine presence, how it identifies in our life these days. So, Phil, start us off. Tell me something about how you how you saw God previously, and how that's changed up until this point now.
Well, to be honest, it hasn't really changed.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, unpack that for me, son. Unpack that for me.
Well, I if anything, it's just before I came into Christianity, I would say I would have had some sort of. I guess I don't even have a definitive idea about who he was or what. If you're talking about it from a Christian sense, it's all about it's all about what's the word, relationship, and how you believe that he is interacting in your life. So for me, it was like a very personal thing where it was like an inner sort of consciousness that that spoke to me that I felt spoke to me in certain situations, and it kind of like guides you through life, I guess. Where when you look at it from the various religious circles that you kind of go into, I just found that, and this is probably one of the reasons why I kind of moved away from religion, because I found that the influences of the religious groups were kind of convoluting my already established relationship that I believe I had with God, I say, and so I've just gone back to that essentially.
So how would you, see, I'm without starting to talk about what I believe God to be, when you're talking about like a relationship, obviously we're not talking about like a face-to-face relationship like you and I have.
No. I guess to explain, how do you explain this really? It's bloody hard. But I think, speaking from my own experiences in my own life, is that there is a kind of underlying rule in every situation that you kind of just need to, that you kind of know of, but you don't really aren't able to say you go into a new situation which you're not sure of. And I've been in this sort of thing before, where you already know what the right thing to do is, but you potentially might not be, you potentially don't do it, or but there is that sort of like understanding that is the better thing to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you have it's like a sixth sense.
It's kind of like an understanding that when you go into a situation in any part of life, you know that this is the better thing to do, or the more correct thing to do, and then you just have a choice of just going and doing it. And so I guess in my mind, for me, that's how like the relationship exists, is where you have this, and I guess you can call it the universe or God or whatever, because I feel like it exists in everybody. Whether they acknowledge it or not, and it's kind of true, when you tend to ignore that part, you kind of tend to not listen to it more and more, or not hear it so clearly after a while, I guess.
So I suppose, in without getting into deep philosophical discussions about consciousness and free will and all that kind of stuff, you're talking about your subconsciousness, or what we would call oh, crap, I've had a mind fart. Like the little voice inside your head. What's the term we use for that? I want to say conscience. Our conscience. That's right.
Yeah.
So in reality, what I'm hearing is you're almost having a relationship with yourself, but
Yeah.
that voice, that conscience, isn't created by you.
Yeah.
Per se.
Exactly. Well, it is and it isn't, because that's the debate that you always seem to have, is that whether you believe that is just your consciousness, and that is just a byproduct of the society you live in, or is it something else? And how are you able to truly prove any of it? Really, the answer is you can't. And for me, there has been obvious situations in my life that if I didn't choose to listen to that, I guess for say voice, I mean, I would be in a very different place, and so, yeah, that's how I
Yeah, no,
look at it.
I think that kind of explanation is not abnormal. It's a place that I sit as well, in terms of when someone says to me, what is God to you? For me, it used to be, I used to kind of hold the part or toe the party line of believing in this kind of being that existed, but not within the realms of our ability to be able to see it or touch it.
Mm,
Much like, at the same time, parts of Christianity will also talk about the devil, as also being a being that deceives you and whatnot. So you had this kind of dualistic thought process of both God and the devil being beings that existed, but yet you couldn't see. And as Paul says in the Bible, we believe in the unseen powers of God, or
yeah.
God being unseen and the power of God being seen. For me, and I think you agree with this, we've had this discussion before, when you start describing what God is, once you start, you've already created a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I was just there to say, Rick, even though I still hold on to this sort of like mindset, I am constantly challenging it to find out, the shortfalls, and also, the areas where it just doesn't make any sense, or it. I don't believe that you just have to believe and that's it, and you can't make sense of it. I think, in all wisdom of the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, you shouldn't be able to not make sense of it.
Mm.
And you probably will never make sense of it, but you will have enough sense wherever you are in life to be like, yeah, okay, I can make sense of it,
Yeah,
regardless if you have all the truth or not.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem with how people represent what believing means. When it says, when people say, "Oh, I believe in God," it's like, what does that actually mean to believe
Yeah,
in God? For me, it's to believe in a way, in a way of doing things. Like, we spoke about this before last week, about how Jesus commands his followers to love their enemies. Now, in hindsight, or loving your enemies seems foolish to a lot of people. It's like, well, why would you want to do good to people that are doing bad to you? It seems foolish. And there might not be any like quick fixes to the problems through your love of someone who wants to do bad to you. But you have to believe that that is the way to create a new world. Because if you don't believe that it can create a new world, then you're not going to actually do it. You're not actually going to follow through and be a part of that kind of existence. And that for me is the essence of belief. It's not some head knowledge of believing in a being that you believe is a man because Jesus said, use the pronoun, a male pronoun for God. I fell into that trap. And then I came out of that when I remember listening to a very profound speaker. I can't remember his name now. But he spoke about how in the Bible, when Moses was talking to God and Moses was going to go to the people in Egypt, he said, who should I say send? Who should I say sent me? And he says, well, just say, I am sent you. And to most people, it's like, I am what? You know, like,
yeah.
As soon as you finish that sentence, you've created a problem. Because for me, if you want God to be a male, then that's what you need. If you need God to be a female, that's what you need. If you need God to be a Canadian lumberjack who works 14 hours a day and loves his job, then so be it. Like, whatever, you know, if that's what gets you through the day and that's what gives you that hope and that power to create an existence in this world that is good, not only for yourself but for everyone else and for the environment and stuff like that, then so be it. Like, and I believe that's why that whole creation of just say I am sent you was put there. It wasn't as a way of God just kind of confusing people. No, it was specifically said because it should the finishing article is whatever you want it to be. That gives you that hope.
Yeah, I agree.
Fabulous. But I'm going to say something very profound now.
Go on.
I've been waiting. I've been waiting to say this for weeks, and I wanted to save it for this God episode.
Yeah.
And even though, if someone said to me, you know, what is God to you? God to me is a spirit. God is a spirit. Spirit of goodness. So you have the spirit of goodness and you have the spirit of accusation, and accusation always leads to destruction, because once you start accusing people of doing things or accusing people of being this, that, and the other, it creates a destructive nature. But I believe God is everything that is good. So anything that you do that is good and that is life-giving in this world, it is from the Spirit of God. Anything that goes against goodness, love, and stuff like that is not of the Spirit of God. Whether God is actually a being, I couldn't care less. Like, to me, it's all about how I react to whether it's good or bad in this case, because that's just the opposite that we use. But this is where the rubber meets the road for me, because people will say to me, why do you believe in God? And I'm going to tell you straight, and this is very new for me. This only came around in the last few months. And I think I've found something that really holds deep in why I hope, and I emphasize the word hope. I hope there is a God. And this is the reason why. People who are killed or die before their time unjustly, so like children who get cancer, people who are murdered, people's lives who are cut short because of something that's outside of what they've done. That's an injustice in my mind. I pray that there is a God, because I would hate to think that these people died in vain. And that they don't get any justice in the sense, and when I say justice, I'm talking about the ability to be resurrected in the, you know, inverted commas, because again, that's a loaded question, that's a loaded term as well, but have that opportunity to live again in a world where there is no death, no destruction, and stuff like that.
Interesting.
See,
So,
I don't hope for there to be a God, because that means that I get eternal life, or, you know, I live forever, whatever. I hope there is a God because of the injustice done against people that die before their time. Because that for me is just like, I just can't compute that. I can't compute it. It just baffles me and saddens me to the nth degree.
interesting.
And this goes against all Christian understanding, because, oh well, did they believe in God? Did they profess Jesus as their Lord and Savior? You know, all this rhetoric that you always hear from
Oh,
Christians.
yeah. Oh, I forgot about that.
It's got nothing to do with that anymore. It's just solely based on.
Yeah, I mean that's a good. I mean that's really boiling it down, and yeah.
So that's why I believe in God. That is my one major hope for there to be a God, is that he can bring those people justice and allow them to live again, let's say, even if it's reincarnation. Oh, oh, heretic.
But
Which
okay, what about like?
which a resurrection is reincarnation, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, that's
I don't know. That's a question I haven't even pondered, to be honest. So what about the kids that had like their lives cut short, but say they? Well, I guess no, that's a bad.
no.
Yeah.
Say what's in
Well, no, I mean I already know the answers to my question.
your mind. I suppose this brings on the the logical follow up to what I just talked about is, well, then do you actually need to believe there is a God?
No.
What do you mean by that? Because obviously it all depends on what you mean by believe anyway.
No, you don't. Because again, it comes down to whether there isn't a God. In the day, is how you chose to live your life. Is the main crux of it all, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose this comes down to the end result, isn't it? Like, Christianity paints the need for a belief in God so that you can live forever, or
Yeah.
you can find yourself in heaven. Which, when you boil that down, like, don't get me wrong, I haven't, I don't think that's a bad thing to believe in.
No, it's wonderful.
Yeah, because you get hope from that. But when you start defining how other people may end up, per se,
Yeah.
based upon your own understanding, well, now it's become a fear-based rhetoric. Now
Well, yeah. The purpose, the very innocent and beautiful thing that you've just believed in, you've corrupted by, you know, by defeating the purpose of what were you truly believing in. Because if the whole idea of heaven is not that you're off in a hill living by yourself away from everybody. It's more like heaven is more like a community where you live an actual tranquility with everybody, right? Which is what the whole, premise of the Bible is, essentially, is that the kingdom of God is already here. You just need to provide it, essentially, to keep it going. And that's up to each individual to continue.
Yeah, and it's not even about heaven. Like, the Christian religion shouldn't be about heaven, because one, Jesus rarely talks about heaven, and when he does, he's not talking about a celestial place that you go to when you die. He's talking about the king, like you said, the reign of God right here, right now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said in his prayer for God's will to be done on earth as it is in heaven, and say things like the meek will inherit the earth. It's like, well, if the meek are going to inherit the earth, then who's going to inherit heaven? The wankers.
Yeah.
Like, it's all very here and now based. It's not.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not some far off future event that you just have to grim and bear the slings and arrows
on earth.
It's my cross to carry being a Christian. I get abused day in, day out because I'm a Christian. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Because there are people who are Christian who are legitimately abused by countries who don't have freedom of speech and stuff like that. But I'm talking, my cynicism comes from the Western world.
Of course, yeah, where people are believing that they're being criticized and bullied, but it's really just their own bloody fault.
Just to put a fine point on things. So stop being so sensitive.
Well, yeah, I mean, partially that comes into it.
I just going off that. What's your thoughts on one of my hang-ups that just it doesn't, like, the whole taking God's name in vain. Like, I'm of the essence of, like, if someone wants to go like, oh, Jesus Christ, or oh, for God's sake, like, that doesn't bother me. Like, for me, that's not taking God's name in vain. But for some of my Christian friends, they get very bent out of shape when people say these things. Like, 99.9% of the time, it's just done through ignorance. Anyway.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's sorry.
Secondly, taking God's name in vain is not blurting out some frustration. For me, to take God's name in vain is to do something like use the name of God to make yourself rich. That's that's taking God's name in vain.
Yeah.
Not going, oh, Jesus Christ. And I'm sure God, if God is a being sitting on the cloud, which I don't even believe that's true, but I'm pretty sure he's not looking around at people who are going, oh, for God's sake, I'm like, right, mark him
down in the bad box.
Yeah. It's like, and I just don't understand the need for Christians to feel like they have to defend God. Like, if for most Christians, they believe God is all powerful. So if he's all powerful, he doesn't need you to protect him or her or it, whatever you use it. So it's like that disconnect, isn't there? But sorry, you was going to say something else before.
No, I mean, you've already covered that point. But I was just going to say is that like saying even a swear word, like whatever, it's an expression of a frustration of some sort, or it's not per se a bad word. you know,
Well, it's just
you can make it whatever word you want, you know.
you can make it mean whatever you want it to mean.
Exactly. And I think, yeah, you're right. It's just that taking God's name in vain is legitimately just, getting rich off it. Or, where in the olden days they would go and slaughter people in God's name.
Or stone the crows, use it to manipulate people.
Yeah. That's the true meaning of.
Like, God's gonna burn you in hell forever if you don't believe in him.
Yeah.
Isn't that a type of manipulation?
Yep.
Yes, using fear to manipulate people to do something.
Yeah.
And people wonder why. And look, and fortunately, I was never part of a Christian community that believed that anyway. But
I wasn't either. Yes.
Knob.
Anyway.
So what's your final thoughts on what God is for our listeners, our one listener? Hopefully my mum's listening.
Man. Final thoughts. Yeah, God is love, man. God is the voice that is guiding you, the presence of the universe that kind of like you can't just get away from it.
So when you say
learn to listen to it better, and don't be so damn stubborn.
Just
what you think it is, rather than recognize the fear and go against it, I guess.
Just to open up a can of worms, totally agree. Just to open up a can of worms, does there have to be a certain name for God?
No.
As in like Buddha or
hey man, Buddha's a good guy.
Someone in the Bhagavad Gita or Yahweh or Jesus, or does it have to be under a certain name?
Good question. And we'll answer that on the next episode.
Well, this was the segue. This was the segue, because obviously next week we're going to start talking about Jesus and what Jesus means to us. And obviously Jesus says, I am the way, I am the truth and the life. No one gets through to the Father without coming through me first. So that is a bold statement to make. And that indicates, on face value, that Jesus is the be-all and end-all. But is it true? Find out next week on Chatting Up the Chick, when Phils and Chris go real biblical on your ass.
Oh yeah.
Wickeder, wickeder, yes, yes.
Yes, yes.